welcome to the deep dive. Today we're looking at something, well, pretty huge in the energy world. India's really rapid growth in renewables, specifically wind and solar.
Yeah, it's quite the story.
We've got some great insights lined up, pulling from a new report by Ember, the London energy think tank, and also looking at India's broader power sector.
Right.
So if you're following, global climate shifts or India's economy, or maybe you're just curious about where electricity is heading, this should be really interesting for you.
And the headline finding is really quite striking, isn't it?
It is. Go on.
India is now the third largest generator of electricity from wind and solar globally.
Third largest. Wow.
Yeah, they've actually overtaken Germany. It's just China and the U.S. ahead now.
Okay, let's dig into that. Third largest.
Yeah.
That really signals a major shift, doesn't it? To you listening, it's a big deal on the global energy stage.
Absolutely. And it seems like solar power is, well, the real engine behind this.
Right. The Ember report mentions that globally, wind and solar hit 15% of generation in 2024. India's close behind at 10%.
Still impressive.
But solar's the standout. I mean, globally, solar generation doubled in just 3 years. Doubled.
That's huge. Over 2,000 terawatt hours in 2024.
And a terawatt hour is, well, it's a massive amount of power, right?
Yeah.
Enough for millions of homes for a year.
Exactly. And India's own solar output, it mirrored that global trend. Doubled, too.
So what share does it have now in India?
It's reached 7% of their total electricity generation from solar alone.
7%.
Okay.
And the scale of their additions just last year in 2024.
Oh, it was staggering. They added 24 gigawatts of new solar capacity.
24 gigawatts. Can you put that in context?
Well, think of it like adding, several very large coal power plants worth of capacity, but clean energy in just 1 year.
That kind of pace. It's more than just numbers, isn't it? It signals a real strategic shift.
It absolutely does. And that single year's growth made India the third largest adder of solar capacity globally, too. Only China and the U.S. added more in 2024.
So you can really see the energy transition accelerating there.
You can. And there's another stat that really jumped out at me.
Yeah.
How they're meeting new demand. In 2024, renewables met 33%, a third of the increase in India's electricity demand.
A third from renewables. Okay, and how does that compare?
Well, get this. The year before, 2023, coal met 91% of the increased demand.
91% down to, well, coal still met a lot, but renewables picked up a third of the new load. That's a dramatic change in just 12 months.
It really underscores the momentum renewables have gained. Which brings us to the why, doesn't it? What's driving this, and what's the potential going forward?
Right. There was a quote from Nicholas Fergum at Ember that caught my eye.
Ah, yes, the comparison with China.
Exactly. Yeah. He said, in terms of renewable energy expansion, India is at the point where China was a few years ago. Now, China is meeting new electricity demand with renewables. Sooner or later, the turning point will come when India can also do the same.
That comparison really frames it, doesn't it? It suggests a trajectory.
Yeah, it does. And the Ember report itself suggests renewables could meet potentially 75% of India's increase in electricity demand by 2030.
75% of the increase.
Yeah.
That's ambitious.
Very. What needs to happen to get there? What are the levers?
Well, Fergum pointed out something interesting. Based just on the projects already being built or planned,
Yeah.
wind and solar generation could potentially double again by 2028?
Double again, just from what's already in the pipeline.
Pretty much. And he also notes that India is, in absolute terms, adding more renewable capacity than most other developing nations.
Why is that?
A big part is having a domestic manufacturing base already established, plus, lots of large-scale projects underway. The key now, he says, is just accelerating what's already working, kicking the wind and solar sectors into an even higher gear.
Okay, so solar is clearly a huge part of this story. The report also talked about the global solar boom.
Right, that doubling in 3 years, exceeding 2,000 TWh globally.
Why has solar specifically become such a game changer?
A few key things. First, speed. Just how fast you can deploy it.
Faster than other sources.
Much faster. It took solar only 8 years globally to go from 100 to 2,000 TWh.
Wow. And wind.
Wind took 15 years for a similar jump. Hydropower took decades, 6 decades.
6 decades versus 8 years. That's incredible.
It is. And in 2024 alone, a record 593 GW of solar was added globally. Fergum said something like, there's never been a year where 600 GW of anything was added before.
Just think about that scale. Unprecedented growth.
Exactly.
And the timing seems, well, opportune, doesn't it? With rising electricity demand, especially during heat waves.
Precisely. Solar generation often peaks in the afternoon on sunny days, which lines up almost perfectly with when cooling demand spikes during heat waves.
So it helps stabilize the grid during those stressful periods.
It's becoming a really valuable asset for grid stability for that reason. Now, obviously, the sun doesn't shine all the time, so its utilization rate is lower than, say, a coal plant.
Right, it's intermittent.
But because it's so quick to build and the costs have come down so dramatically, it's often the best way to meet those peaks in demand.
And economically, how does it stack up?
That's the other killer app, really. The report states it's now the cheapest form of new electricity.
Cheaper than coal or gas?
Yeah.
Even considering manufacturing emissions and all that?
Yes, considering the whole life cycle. And once it's built, the running costs are near zero. No fuel costs.
Right.
So it beats new coal and gas on cost. Plus, it's homegrown energy, reduces reliance on, global coal supply chains, which can be volatile.
Okay, let's pivot slightly and bring in the view from the wider power utility sector analysis for India. It shows electricity use is growing significantly there too, right?
Oh, absolutely. Per capita consumption is expected to grow steadily. They use a measure called KGR, compound annual growth rate.
Right, average annual growth.
Yeah, projected at 5-7% per year, reaching maybe 1,550 kilowatt hours per person by FY29. That's up from around 1,330 in FY23.
And what's driving that growth?
It's a mix of things you'd expect. More people getting access to electricity, incomes rising, more electric vehicles, urbanization, all contributing.
And we've already seen overall demand climb pretty fast.
Yep, around 8.4% average annual growth between FY21 and FY24.
You mentioned heat waves earlier. Is that changing when demand peaks?
It seems so. Since the pandemic, the peak demand has noticeably shifted more towards the summer months.
Driven by air conditioning, presumably.
Largely, yes. Those intense heat waves are pushing peak demand higher. It's expected to jump by another 75 GW just between FY25 and FY29.
Could cross 300 GW total peak demand then.
That's the projection, a really substantial increase.
So how does all this impressive renewables growth, especially solar, fit into that bigger picture of rising demand in India?
Well, the projections are quite telling for you listening. By 2032, solar is forecast to be the single largest source of installed capacity.
Largest share. Bigger than coal.
Yep. Expected to be around 38.6% solar, followed by coal at about 28.5% and wind at 16.5%.
So solar really dominates the future capacity mix in these plants.
It does. And all this activity renewables, but also ongoing thermal power projects and building out the transmission grid, it's driving a lot of business, big order books in the power sector itself.
Okay, it sounds like a very positive story overall. But are there still major challenges? You can't all be smooth sailing, right?
No, definitely not. It's crucial for you to remember that while renewables are growing fast, coal still met the majority of the increase in demand in 2024.
What was that figure again?
64% of the increase was met by coal. So the transition has a long way to go.
Right. It's not phasing out coal rapidly just yet.
Not yet. And there are other persistent issues. The state electricity boards, the distributors, often face financial difficulties. They have high losses in transmission and distribution, AT&C losses, they call them.
Like leaky pipes losing energy before it gets to customers.
Exactly. It costs money, reduces efficiency, and in areas with weaker grid infrastructure, they'll likely continue to face energy shortages or base deficits.
And what about new non-renewable capacity?
That's the other point. The government still plans to add quite a bit of new thermal, mostly coal capacity by 2032, around 80,000 megawatts.
So traditional energy sources are still very much part of the plan for the medium term.
Yes, indicating they see a continued need for that baseload power alongside the renewable expansion. It highlights the complexity.
Okay, so let's try and wrap this up. Bring it all together for you listening. India's progress in wind and solar is, well, genuinely remarkable.
Definitely. It positions them as a major global player in renewables now.
Driven significantly by that massive solar expansion we talked about.
Yeah.
And it clearly holds huge potential for meeting India's rising energy needs more cleanly.
And remember, this isn't just an India story. It has real implications for global climate goals, for India's own energy security, and just the future at how we all generate electricity.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So staying informed on this is pretty key for you to understand where things are headed. But as we just discussed, while the progress is impressive, that continued reliance on coal for a big chunk of new demand, plus the challenges in the distribution system, it shows this energy transition is complex, isn't it?
It's definitely not straightforward. Lots of moving parts.
It really makes you wonder, doesn't it?
Sure.
What other policy shifts or maybe technology breakthroughs might be needed to really speed up India's path to an even cleaner energy future? Something for you to think about.
Definitely food for thought.
Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.